Octopath Traveler has been one of the most successful new RPG series of the past few years, and it makes complete sense that Square Enix will continue to develop these games for the foreseeable future. Right? I certainly hope and expect so, even if there's likely some stuff Team Asano will focus on before making a third game. There's also the questions about what a third game in the series could look like and bring to the gameplay and story formula. That's what I want to discuss in this video, so let's talk all about Octopath. First off, I want to talk about the areas in which Octopath 2 improved and changed as compared to the original. I'm doing this to give a sense of the areas that Team Asano thought were crucial to address and what that might reveal as they look to a third game. The biggest change, of course, being the increased interactions between the characters on their crossed paths. Good change. Brought out more in each of the characters, and by connecting it to the mystery that would resolve as the final conflict of the game, led to a more coherent narrative than the first game had. The job system was slightly modified with more limited job changes surrounding the job licenses you would get from each guild. You still have plenty of options, but you may need to pick and choose a little more to make your characters the best they could be. This also included alterations to the secret jobs and how you obtain and upgrade them. The day and night cycle and how it impacted path actions and enemies you would face was another big change, and expanded options for designing each character and even dungeons. Water travel added some extra exploration options on top of that. They also changed some of the general structure of character chapters and how the stories were told. Then finally, the latent powers were a big new part of the battle system that gave each character another unique ability that would help you get back into battle at times. There are some other minor changes like the Hunter's automatic capture mechanic, but I'd say those are the biggest changes. What I get from that is that while they were clearly listening to feedback from the original game leading to the cross paths, for example, there really wasn't any part of the game's system that went completely unchanged. Some of it was little tweaks, but the culmination was a very fun experience, and I see no reason for them to not think of that again. Therefore, with my assumption that the developers will review each aspect of the game to see what could be changed, added, or removed, I shall do the same, starting with character and story writing. Octopath 2 was a vast improvement on the first game, and the changes made should stay. The ending scenario wasn't really a change, but simply making the story more cohesive with the through line during the main story of the game and the cross paths all coming together at the end, and not via some random side quest like in Octopath 1, was a huge improvement. Then we have cross paths. I think this will and should stay in Octopath 3, but maybe with a slightly adjusted format. Start off with 4 pairs of characters in the Chapter 1 of Cross Paths, and then have Chapter 2 connect 2 of the pairs so we have 4 characters interacting and exploring in that part. Then we would have more chances for character interactions. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing Ochet and Casti interacting, but I also wanted to see them with Oswald and Particio. This way we'd get an initial look at the pairs and then a change dynamic with new interactions and faces in the second chapter. It would be more of a challenge to write, but I'm sure the writers can make something happen. Either that or have more single chapter cross paths for each character, so Hikari could have one with Agnia and Temenos or something like that. The next one to cover is the job system. It seems evident that the standard 8 starting jobs are going to be consistent going forward, but how are they going to handle the next jobs? I liked the license system to limit your party a little more and make your choices around the secondary and secret classes count more. I do think the special secret jobs could have been handled better though, as several of them were underwhelming overall. In part, what made some of them underwhelming was the change in how you progressed and got skills for the jobs. I know it was part of the developers' efforts to make us explore the world more, but I honestly think I prefer the secret job system for Octopath 1 because they still felt like traditional jobs since they gained skills normally and also felt like upgrades to a lot of the traditional jobs. My honest but unlikely wish is for some more diverse standard jobs, but the more realistic hope is that the secret jobs are a blend of effective without being overpowered and still function like the usual jobs. Now, as for path actions and the day and night cycle, Octopath 2 really struck gold with the different path actions based on the time of day. Brilliant idea, and I can never get over how the night music themes work so perfectly in the game as well, but I'll gush about the music later in the video. In my video on an Octopath sequel after the first game came out, I proposed some different path actions with alterations in how they worked on NPCs. I really think this is an area of creativity that the team could look for to keep things fresh. Maybe even a field path action that would allow for unique interactions while you're exploring around in the fields and dungeons. I think the hunter character could have a field path action called Track, which would allow them to get a guaranteed encounter with a monster of choice in an area. The path action system remains one of the most intriguing parts of the gameplay in the series and really sets Octopath Traveler apart from other contemporary RPGs. I just want them to take full advantage of that opportunity. The day and night cycle enhanced that for the sequel in either adjusting the existing path action results or expanding where unique path actions can take place would afford Octopath 3 the same chance to deepen the system. I am in favor of them trying some new things with the path actions because it seems to me the value of the system is from the options it gives and not the specific actions the characters take. Now, water traversal wasn't the biggest update for the Octopath series, but it was an unexpected one, at least for me. I simply hadn't considered that the developers would even touch how you move about the world. By including water travel, the level design for each region became more diverse and could hold more secrets to make proper exploration more rewarding. I do think though that the traversal methods may have reached its limit unless the game decides to incorporate climbing or flying. What then can Octopath Traveler 3 do to keep the momentum going towards more varied and interesting world design? To me, the answer would be to include more things in the world, both in the cities and towns of the game and out in the fields and dungeons. Xenoblade Chronicles exploration is great in part because of the variety of resources and other events littered around the map. Octopath could embrace some of those aspects, maybe have heart-to-heart conversations in specific locations on the map, and get some more character development and interactions as well. This is another reason why having field path actions would enhance the game as a whole. That's just my thoughts though, and I think it more likely the developers will stick to field exploration being centered around treasure and battles. Octopath 2 had some instances of choosing how to proceed through a chapter with multiple locations and sections. We saw this with Ochette in tackling each of the beasts, or Throne's choice of going after mother or father first. While I did enjoy how this varied up the storytelling, I think the developers were too conservative while designing the system. Due to the recommended level discrepancy between, say, the mother or father route for Throne, it was pretty much a false choice of which one to do first. The vast majority of players played mother's route first, and even if you changed that, it impacted the story little. I like having choices in games, but those choices are far more meaningful when they have an actual impact. For Octopath 3, I would love to see actual choices if they want to keep this structure. Worried about balancing levels? Have us make the choice at the end of the previous chapter and set the chapter's levels based on that choice. It's more complicated to program, but also lends weight to the narrative and unique aspects of each character's story. I don't expect them to go this route, but I do believe this would enhance the storytelling of Octopath, rather than the somewhat bare bones approach that they put together for the most recent game. This leads me finally to the battle system. A system I hadn't thought would get better for the sequel, and am more than happy to have been proven wrong about. There were no new classes, no new weapons, but they did adjust or straight up change plenty of the skills. Agnia was not Primrose. That was very clear from the story perspective, but the gameplay also showed this by having different skills. Heck, they even changed what elemental magic they had. Primrose used dark magic, which fit her revenge-based story, and Agnia's was wind, fitting her adventurous traveling spirit. I hope and expect the developers will do the same for the next bunch of characters as well. Keep the specific weapons and elements, but shift them between the characters based on their personalities and stories, to make the new cast distinct. Then we have the real big change, the latent powers, another important way to make the characters unique in their battle utility. I adore the latent powers, and the satisfying thing with the system is it, like the skills, can change for the next cast. Of course the next merchant isn't going to have Partitio's particular latent power. They're not going to be Partitio. All of this is to say that I don't have particular additions or subtractions that I think Octopath 3 would benefit from when it comes to combat. What makes the most sense is to keep going with changing the skills and powers to fit the new cast and make them distinct. I'd even be down for them changing them more than Octopath 2 did. Our next warrior character could be axe-based, or our next cleric may embrace more of the fire magic than light as part of the Church of the Eternal Flame or some such thing. The options are there, and I think Octopath 3 could take those steps to make each character special in the game and series if they are bold enough to expand the areas they can adjust. Overall though, I don't worry too much about the combat. I think it's gonna be a great time regardless. Now before I move on to the presentation changes I would like to see, I do want to touch on if there's anything from the first game that I think should be brought back after being taken out for the second game. The answer is pretty much no. There are some settings I would be more than happy for them to get back to. I liked Cyrus's hometown and how he fit into the narrative, and I would love to see a similar sort of situation, but as for gameplay and other details like that, I can't think of anything that Octopath 1 had that 2 didn't. As for presentation, the base level of art, music, and the like is fantastic. There's no glaring area of need for them to address apart from retaining Yasunori Nishiki for the next soundtrack. That being said, much like the previous points I've covered, there are still some ways for the game to improve in my opinion. The art style is still fantastic. This one I legitimately have no critiques for. I just want them to continue refining and figuring out how to push the system further and further, as seen in the transition from Octopath 1 to 2. The creativity in camera angles for battles and scenes can be expanded upon, and we'll have another beautiful and enjoyable world to walk through. Musically, let Nishiki do his stuff. Octopath 2's soundtrack is almost as good as the first one, which is an incredibly high bar to hit, and I just want to hear more of his work. Now there are two things that I would like to see added, and both of them were on display in the recent Star Ocean The Second Story R. The first is with regards to fast travel. In Second Story R, you can fast travel not just to every town you've been to, but every save point in a dungeon you have already passed. I think this makes so much sense for Octopath to include and would improve my experience getting around and exploring each area and dungeon thoroughly. Plus, it's very convenient. They could even make larger, longer dungeons with this in place. The second comes with the character portraits. I talked about this in my video on a sequel to Triangle Strategy, but having character portraits as characters talk would be a huge help to us figuring out the emotion of the story, and increasing our investment in the characters' arcs. The voice acting in Octopath 2 was improved over 1, but it's still the only game in town when it comes to emotion, and there's so much lovely character art of the main cast that I'd love to see in the game proper. Put these together, and you have another great chance to make a richer narrative with more memorable characters, and maybe encourage the voice direction to let the actors go a little further. They've been working on it. I think we still are a few steps away from having pure peak performance from our voice actors, and I do think that the character portraits would help. Give me those two things, and I think the presentation of Octopath 3 would be nearly perfect. Okay, now it's time for wild speculation on release date, and let's jump straight into what Team Asano's plans are looking like. There was a recent teaser post that seemed to indicate that, like expected, the next Team Asano game would be from the Bravely series. With that, and presumably Dragon Quest III Remake occupying their attention in 2024, that means that a Triangle Strategy sequel would likely be a 2025 release along with maybe another remake. That leaves 2026 as an open year for a new Octopath game, and gives them plenty of time to find their footing and ideas. The team did say they were trying to be more consistent and this schedule would fit that ideal, but we all know what happens with the best of intentions. My prediction then is a 2026 release most likely, but there's still a chance it gets pushed further back if their current schedule proves overly ambitious. Either way, I'm looking forward to when that does happen, and will likely be enjoying plenty of their games that come out before then. What are your thoughts on a third game for the Octopath series? Is there anything I didn't touch on that you think would be good to include or exclude in the next game? Let me know in the comments, and give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to keep up with the channel and all things Octopath RPG and beyond, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a great day, and happy gaming!